Reuben Mark was CEO of Colgate-Palmolive for 21 years. He was employed with the company for 42 years. Mr. Mark was a champion of the distinctive Colgate culture that sustained this success with a deep commitment to managing with respect, developing all Colgate people and instilling them with Colgate values and ethics. Delano E. Lewis, former U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of South Africa and former President and Chief Executive Officer of National Public Radio, has held a long and successful career in global corporate and public affairs. Prior to his diplomatic appointment by President Clinton, Ambassador Lewis was an executive with C&P Telephone Company in Washington, D.C., a subsidiary of AT&T.
So what I'd like to do, start off with, is really talk about your friendship and where that sort of developed and how that, what kind of role that played in the boardroom. Could we start there?
Sure. Maybe I could start how the friendship developed. It was a corporate relationship. I was invited to join the Colgate-Palmolive board by then Chairman and CEO Reuben Mark, and it was one of the exciting times of my life. So our relationship began from a corporate point of view as a board member of the Colgate-Palmolive board. And over the years, and I was there for 23 years on the board, over that time, we not only had corporate relationships, but personal relationships began to develop as well. So that's how it all began.
And from my end, Adam, we had conducted a search. One of our directors retired, who had contributed a lot, and we wanted to find someone who had the sensitivity and the caring aspects that went along with our board culture. And we had several names, and Dell's rose to the top. We were especially impressed by the fact that he had spent time in government and spent time in the Peace Corps and spent time with public broadcasting. And I had read some of the things that he had said and was very much in favor of the kind of open and free thinking that he had. So the board decided that was a great candidate. And fortunately, Dell said yes.
No, I was just saying it was a great offer. I was very excited to say yes. Thank you.
And it lasted a couple of decades, which was wonderful. And we ended up with a lot of business history and personal history together, and it was a good long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. Still is.
When did you join the board, Dell?
Well, I was trying to think about that. It was in the Reuben probably have to help me. I was going to look that up. It was the early 90s, I think. And lasted 23 years, but I had a gap in there. I had to let corporate boards go when I became U.S. Ambassador to South Africa. And when I came back in a year and a half, Colgate-Palmolive invited me back to the board. And I was very thrilled to rejoin the board. So I had a gap in that 23-year history, but it was the early 90s.
Okay.
And we had, Dell and I had a secret agreement that come what may, he would rejoin when he got back. And it was great.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Dell, what, Reuben talked about what he so admired about you, and obviously being on the board of Colgate-Palmolive obviously is very prestigious, but what drew you to want to be on the board, and especially about Reuben?
Well, it was probably one of the best managed corporate boards and an exciting company with great products and ethical leadership. And Reuben was just a very special leader. Not only did he understand business and he understood Colgate-Palmolive's business around the world, but he was a human person who believed in people. And that showed very clearly from his employees and work with the employees, and for his relationships with people around the world. So I was attracted to the ethical leadership of Reuben, his business acumen, and a company that was so well run with great products. So it was and then Reuben, when you talk about personal relationships, he surprised me I served with him on the board and got this appointment, nomination, and confirmation for the ambassadorship. And I look up in my swearing in, and I had invited a number of people, but I didn't expect Reuben to come. And there he was at my swearing in Washington, D.C. That's typical Reuben.
That was great. And the smiles on both Del's part and his wife Gail's part could not be equaled anywhere at that moment. That was wonderful. But one of the reasons, another reason why Del perhaps wanted to join was that he was in Africa and his various locations before, was very interested in small business. And he recognized me as a small businessman. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You must know Reuben has a real sense of humor too. That's what really also made for a great leader and a great friend.
Actually, interestingly, Adam, and Del subscribes to this totally, I know, is that humor is such an important tool in any situation, but in a business situation, it's magical, especially self-deprecating humor that you can make everybody change their mood just with a couple of words. And I've always found that to be a very valuable habit.
Yes. What's interesting, obviously today, one of the big keywords is diversity. So I was going to ask you, the two of you, as I was saying, that one of the keywords right now is diversity, and I'm curious, Reuben, your legacy is quite phenomenal, and you were a pioneer in so many different areas. So back in the '90s, early '90s, even before that, in terms of the kind of board you wanted to create, the people you wanted to have on board, diversity wasn't really a word back then, but you were sort of a forerunner in many ways. Why was that important to you?
Well, I guess when we were evolving a strategy looking forward in the mid-'80s, 1986 or 1987, to teach us how to become diverse. And what was ironic about it was in that room, with about 20 executives, they were all different colors and nationalities because we were a global company. So we realized that we were farther along than the people who were trying to teach us. So we set up a program of making sure that we knew who was good and around the world, that we kept track of each of those people, and that we had an active program to promote, to make sure that we always had a pool of international executives, irrespective of nationality, but they were schooled in our school. And so that worked very well. And independently, we, I think these days you wouldn't have this name. I asked some of the people of color in the company, I sent out a notice, and we wanted to start a Black action group. It sounds a little tougher than it really was, but we got some people who were in important position to lead it, and it exists to this day. And similarly, there was a program for women, so we could make sure, or try to make sure as we went along, that everybody's interests were minded, and that each group within the company had a spokesperson and a mechanism to come right to the top of the company.
Del?
Yeah, I was going to add, Reuben's leadership was ahead of his time in terms of diversity, because he had set in motion, as he said, recognition of talent, but giving support to those persons of color, and also for women managers as well. So he was ahead of his time. And this was, it started from the top. It started from Reuben, and that filtered through the board as well as through the company. And I was fortunate enough to succeed a board member who was head of nominating and governance committee. And we took that same mantra that Reuben had started and made sure our board was diverse going forward. And that was always done. And we also, when I had written a couple of books, I was able to talk to some of the groups that Reuben had put together years earlier the women's group, the Blacks group, the Hispanics groups. So he'd been ahead of his time in terms of diversity. And being an international company, he was also understanding bringing folks of color and different cultures around into top leadership positions.
We always basically hire from within. The last 5 CEOs have been developed within the company. And that means that each of them, I guess me included and the current CEO included, have worked around the world. So part of the career path is to work and live in Latin America and Europe, the South Pacific somewhere, or in Africa. And sensitivity that I don't think would exist if it was an all-American kind of group. I remember an experience, and people were taught to respect, obviously, other people's culture. I remember being in Thailand once, and we had a wonderful Thai lunch in the office, and there was a young American engineer. And I asked him, "Do you like Thai food?" To which, of course, there's only one answer. I mean, and he said, "Well, I just came from India, and after that, I can eat anything." So he insulted 2 cultures in one sentence. So I remember thinking that we've got to re-educate this guy heavily.
Well, I'm curious, Reuben, where did this idea of having in the boardroom, sort of having this sort of global society, where did that idea stem from?
I have to attribute that to my predecessor. There's no distinguishing. Everybody's career involves worldwide kind of contact, and which makes it so much easier to get things done.
Yes. So I'm curious, Del, that when you joined Colgate-Palmolive, were you on other boards as well? Had you been on other boards?
Yes.
Yes. As a matter of fact, it was early in my career. I had been on a Geico insurance company and also a bank board, a regional bank board, before I joined Colgate-Palmolive. And again, they had a template that they were looking at for directors. And I think one of the things that they were looking at was a director who was going to give advice on managing or assisting to help managers manage Colgate-Palmolive. This director should have some experience with other corporate boards, and this director should have some management experience. So my telephone experience was there as an executive with, excuse me, the old AT&T. I was a subsidiary of AT&T, Chesapeake and Potomac Telephone Company, and my experience on other boards led me to be invited.
What was sort of unique about what Reuben was doing and what he had, what he had inherited? What made that so special or unique?
Well, there were a couple of things. One, Reuben could help me with the numbers because he's good with the numbers. It's very striking that a major American company, Colgate-Palmolive, most of its revenues come from around the world. And it makes them a very unique company that many American companies, most of their revenues come from America, but not for Colgate-Palmolive. It is truly a global company. And it's very unique. And their leadership, as he mentioned, if you look at a resume of the leaders of Colgate-Palmolive, they have, and they rise to the top, they have been around the world in managerial positions in all parts of the company. So they make sure that this manager gets a full view of what it takes to run a company, a global company like Colgate. So it's very unique in that respect. So it's very hard to compare what Colgate-Palmolive is to other boards, but it's very unique. Would you agree, Reuben?
Yes, I agree definitely. And the opportunity to learn and participate in worldwide kinds of problems is unique. I was on a number of boards as well. And I think another difference perhaps is that it was much more, I thought, of a cooperative effort between the directors and the management than I was on a number of big companies. And you're always astounded when a CEO makes a proposition to the board and they turn it down. I mean, that literally did not happen once where they were on that particular subject, and also that it allows you avoid nailing a director. For example, if Director X says, no, I don't think we should do this because this and this, and I already know that Del thinks the other way and has a good argument, I say, Del, you want to talk to that? And then then you can argue it out that way. But I think the board was very much more involved than other boards that I had been on.
Okay. Let me add to that one, Adam. Reuben is quite right. When I was chair of nominating and governance committee, we worked with an executive search firm and we learned about other boards and we were looking for other people to join our board. One of the things I found out, Reuben, you get a kick out of this one, is that when we were trying to get board members, Colgate was meeting, I think, 7 or 8 times a year. And that wasn't true for many boards. So when we were trying to get board members, they said, you meet that often? Well, I think we ended up meeting 4 or 5 times a year. But I remember when we first joined, we were probably meeting 7 times a year. And that's pretty unusual. And but what that did, what that created a relationship between board and managers. We were up to date. We were involved. They accepted our advice. And we worked very closely with top management and certainly with the CEO because we met often.
So I'm curious, do you recall at that time how many board members there were?
They've historically been 9 board members. I had been a member of a board that had 20 odd members, and then charitable boards which have 30 or 40. And to me, that's not practical. And we also, interestingly, when we renovated our office, we were in the building at 300 Park Avenue since 1955. And we renovated the entire building because obviously it was out of date. But we kept the boardroom the way it was, quite small, paneled, and very intimate. Because you go to some boardrooms that are sort of like STRAC headquarters, and it's really intimidating. This is a lot more enveloping.
Mm-hmm. So then, Reuben, if you have 9 board members, and obviously you and Del became close friends, do you have to be friends with other board members? Is that a prerequisite? Is that very important for you?
Don't misunderstand friends. I mean, one of my particular rules, I know a lot of people don't follow this, and it's their privilege, of course, was that I didn't have social relations with executives in the company. It would be very unusual for my wife and I to go out to dinner with a vice president and his or her spouse. The reason being, and I certainly had plenty of contact, and in things, Christmas parties and picnics and so on, you did the whole thing, hugging babies and doing the whole thing. So I had always thought that if you play tennis with one executive it's all very nice, but I think that creates a jealousy. And why can't I another executive, why don't I have that opportunity to be closely assigned? Anyway, so that I thought that the best way to handle the friendships was to schedule trips occasionally, every year or 2, and somewhere around the world, and for employees to have a picnic, have various parties. We had various worldwide awards ceremonies where the directors played a role, and there would be one director sitting at each table with executives and their spouses. So I, like anything else, I think it has to be thought through. What are the secondary and tertiary effects of what I'm doing or what the company is doing? Because everybody's very sensitive, and rightly so. And if you're caring about their feelings, it affects what you do.
I'm going to add to that, Adam. You really need to define what you mean by the friendship. And when you asked that question earlier, you recall I started with Reuben and I became corporate friends as a member of the board, and he was the president and CEO. We became social friends mostly after I left the board. And we started doing some interesting projects and thinking about projects and consulting with each other over time. But our relationship was a corporate one, but we were certainly friendly. And we had opportunities, as he mentioned, with trips and board meetings and meeting executives and their spouses and so on. But it's really corporate friendships. And I think you should be clear on that. In order to run a company, you really need to keep your eye on that ball and understand your role.
And Del is not mentioning his secret weapon, which is he has an absolutely spectacular spouse, Gail, and she could have written the book "How to Win Friends and Influence People." So that's part of it as well.
Yes. No, well, thank you, Del, for defining that. I appreciate that. So, in terms of corporate friendships, then, in terms of all the things that the two of you went through there at Colgate-Palmolive, are there some unique moments, special moments that sort of stand out for the two of you?
Well, I always think the You Can Make a Difference Award dinner is probably one of the standout times. And it's a dinner every year where Colgate, over the year, throughout the world, executives nominate individuals and teams who go beyond and make a difference in the company. And these are extraordinary things: new inventions, saving money, cost savings, working in the communities, some real scientific breakthroughs. They're just incredible managers who are awarded, and they treat them well. They bring them into New York City for a week with a significant person. It could be a spouse, it could be a mother, it could be an aunt, an uncle. What you could have as a winner, you could bring a significant person, and you're treated for a week in New York and around at Colgate's expense as a winner. And then you have this special evening, this dinner, where you're given an award by the CEO. And the next day, which is the annual meeting, you're introduced to the shareholders. So it's a very unique thing. And I think it's quite a motivator also among employees at Colgate-Palmolive.
And just to build on that briefly, that's a program that's been going on for 35 years or so now. And it's important that that dinner that Del is talking about and that week in New York is basically the tip of the iceberg because for a motivational program to work, it's got to be pressed down into the organization. I mean, if there are 39,000 employees and they only pick 6 to get this award, 6 teams or 8 teams, not many people are going to enter because they don't think they can win. But so it's got to be pressed down. So in every country, during the same year, there's a local You Can Make a Difference program, and someone is honored, a team of people is honored in that subsidiary. And then there's a regional one and so on until it gets winnowed out till you get up to the corporate. So then there's truly a worldwide effort as compared to just, if you ran a contest for the best teacher in New York City, most of the teachers wouldn't enter because no chance I'm going to win out of how many tens of thousands. But if you do it in each school, then it's a different story. So that requires, interestingly, a lot of process. But, a lot of process.
Yes.
Another, if I could comment also, another example where we met a situation together was that when Del was head of the nominating committee that seeks new directors and makes nominations for people within the company. We had to get 2 directors because 2 directors dropped off on an untimely basis. And we recruited 2 very good, Del and his people recruited 2 very good executives. And they both happened to be financially oriented directors. And when they came on in the first couple of meetings, they were in there punching away and not being aware of how things were shared in the company, and that none of this stuff that they were asking for were secrets and everybody knew them, but it was done in a more amicable way. And so Del and the previous chairman of, I guess he was the chairman of the personnel committee, a woman who was for many years the head of Smith College, agreed to make a presentation. Two of them agreed to make a presentation to these directors. And Jill stood up and Del stood up and talked about it. And it was just, here's how we operate. And I had nothing to do with it. I think it was even an executive session. And basically it was directors telling other directors to cool it, that's not the way to handle it. And so it was a very effective cooperative effort.
Oh, Adam, let me just jump in for right quick.
Yes.
Because what Reuben is talking about, and thank you for allowing us to share our thoughts, corporations, most people might not know, have cultures. And that's one of the things that I find so fascinating, because you somehow think a corporation is such a stodgy kind of thing, but it's made up of people and it has a culture. And what Reuben was talking about, the Colgate-Palmolive culture with his leadership particularly, and his predecessors the same, really believed and valued people. And so there was a way things were done at Colgate, and that is you talk them out and you come up with compromises for the good of the company. So not one person takes the floor and charges. We work together and come down to solutions that work for the whole company. So it's a culture.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's thank you. Thank you for that, both of you. Well, on that note, I'm going to let you gentlemen go. It's been absolutely fantastic, a privilege and an honor to get a chance to talk to the two of you together and to hear you reminisce about time spent together. So thank you so very much, Reuben, Del. Thank you.
This is the Black Experience for all. If you like what you hear at the Black Experience, please consider clicking on the join button to support our nonprofit. I'm Adam P. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us.